Hello everyone and welcome to our educational session. My name is Paul Arsov and I'm the founder of the Decentralized Web Project. I'm going to talk about our project and several other projects that we're working on in the end of this presentation. But the topic of this presentation today is anti-colonialism and neo-colonialism, soft power and hybrid warfare. This is part one of this presentation, and we're going to continue next week with part two. This presentation is touching on history, politics, and recent struggles of developing countries in the recent past. So let's start right away. From the early Cold War, the Soviet Union positioned itself as an anti-imperialist ally to colonies fighting for independence. Moscow provided ideological backing, arms, and training to numerous national liberation movements across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. In Africa especially, Soviet aid was extensive. The declassified CIA report noted that Namibia's SWAPO guerrillas received nearly all of their arms directly from the Soviet Union. And Soviet military advisors trained South African anti-apartheid fighters in camps in Angola. Many African revolutionaries studied in Soviet universities or attended Communist Party schools for political and military instruction. In Asia, the USSR likewise trained anti-colonial forces. During the First Indochina War between 1946 and 1954, the Vietnamese rebels fought French colonial rule. Both the Soviet Union and newly communist China stepped up support to Ho Chi Minh Viet Minh, sending weapons, equipment, and instructors to aid the independence struggle. Soviet backing continued in the Vietnam War and other conflicts framed as proletarian internationalism in solidarity with oppressed people. In Latin America, the Soviet cultivated ties with left-wing nationalists and revolutionaries as well. Nikita Khrushchev famously pledged in 1961 to support wars of national liberation worldwide. And the USSR went on to assist movements from Cuba to Chile and Nicaragua with varying degrees of material aid and diplomacy. The global support not only challenged Western colonial powers, but also expanded Soviet influence under the banner of anti-colonialism, though skeptics noted the USSR often advanced its own strategic aims in the process. China also emerged as a vocal champion of anti-colonial movements, especially after the 1949 revolution and the Bandung Conference of 1955, portraying itself as a fellow victim of imperialism. The People's Republic of China offered political support and resources to liberation struggles in the Third World. Throughout the 1950s to 1980s, Beijing provided military intelligence, weapons, and training to freedom fighters in countries such as Algeria, Angola, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, and Namibia, among others. Even the African National Congress, fighting apartheid in South Africa, received some Chinese assistance. This policy was an extension of Maoist ideology, which encouraged anti-imperialism revolutions abroad. Chinese leaders like Zhou and Lai cultivated relations with newly independent states, and for many years it was tradition that China foreign ministers' first overseas visit each year was to Africa. Beyond military aid, China funded infrastructure and post-colonial nations. A notable example being the Tam-Zam Railway, called also Tazara, built in the 1970s to link Tanzania and Zambia, which was financed and engineered by China as an alternative to rail routes controlled by white minority regimes. Such projects boosted China's standing as a partner to post-colonial states, even as they also served to counter Soviet and Western influence. During the Sino-Soviet split, Chinese and Soviet support sometimes went to rival factions, adding a layer of complexity to decolonizations. Soviet and Chinese involvement can be seen in various flashpoints of decolonization. In Angola, as Portuguese colonial rule ended in 1975, a civilian war broke out amongst liberation movements. The Marxist MPLA received a significant military training and equipment from the USSR, while the rival FNLA was supported by US and had Chinese military instructors assisting its fighters. The Cuban military, aligned with the USSR, also intervened on MPLA side, underscoring how the Cold War powers channeled support into what had begun as an anti-colonial struggle. In Vietnam, both the USSR and China were early supporters of the Viet Minh against France. Later, during the Vietnam War, Soviets supplied Hanoi with tanks, anti-aircraft missiles, and advisors, while China provided critical logistical support and manpower in the 1960s. Another example is South Africa. During Zimbabwe's liberation war, the two major rebel armies each had a sponsor. ZIPRA, forces of Joshua Nkomo, were armed by the Soviet bloc, while Robert Mugabe Zanila force drew support from China. Such cases illustrate that USSR and PRC aid was pivotal in bolstering anti-ecological insurgents, though sometimes motivated by their competition for influence in the global south. By and large, the tangible assistance from these communist powers, whether training anti-colonial guerrillas or supplying them with modern weaponry, was a decisive factor in many colonies achieving independence from Western empires. But now we are going to look at what are economic mechanisms of Western imperialism. Modern imperialism often operates not through direct colonial rule, but via economic control. Western powers have developed an array of financial mechanisms to maintain influence over formerly colonized or strategically important countries. Key among these are international finance institutions, debt leverage, neoliberal economic policies, and sanctions, all of which can perpetuate dependency and shape the policies of the global South nations in line with Western's interests. International Monetary Fund and World Bank structures adjustment. The institutions dominated by Western nations have been instrumental in enforcing neoliberal economic orthodoxy across the developing world. Since the 1980s, they have often offered loans and aid packages conditional on recipients implementing structural adjustment programs, or abbreviated as SAP. These programs typically mandate privatization of state industries, deregulations, opening of markets to foreign goods, and drastic cuts to public spending on services like health and education. For many poor countries, such policies were effectively forced as the price of financial support, a form of economic coercion often dubbed as neo-colonialism. The outcome was largely disastrous for local populations. Structural adjustments deepened poverty and inequality in much of Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia, while benefiting foreign investors. A global civil society review in 2002 found that SAP's structural adjustment policies led to worsening poverty and inequality, with the harshest effect on the poorest and especially women. Even World Bank economists admitted that these imposed policies contributed to hundreds of thousands of excess child deaths in a single year due to the economic turmoil that they caused. In short, through the IMF and World Bank, Western nations used financial leverage to remake post-colonial economies in a free market image, often at great human cost, binding those economies into a global system favorable to Western capital. Debt is and had been used as a tool of dependency, Sovereign debt has been another powerful lever of imperialism. After decolonization, many new states borrowed heavily for development, often from Western banks or institutions. This led to debt crises, notably in Latin America in 1980s and Africa in 1990s, that left countries at the mercy of creditors. Western governments and the IMF have used debt restructuring negotiations to dictate economic policy. The indebted nations must adopt creditor-friendly measures like trade liberalization, austerity, privatization, in order to secure refinance of the debt or to achieve relief, effectively surrendering a degree of economic sovereignty. The perpetual cycle of borrowing and repaying, often just to service interest, keeps poor nations dependent on the financial centers of New York, London, Paris, Frankfurt. Debt trap diplomacy is sometimes associated with China today, but for decades the global south has been trapped in Western debt. As evidenced by 1990, many African states were spending more on servicing debt than on healthcare or education for their citizens. Debt thus functions as a neo-colonial mechanism. Countries remain formally independent, but are constrained to follow policies that prioritize repaying Western lenders and sustaining a global financial order skewed in the West's power. Economic sanctions and West dominance was another tool. Western powers, especially the United States, wield economic sanctions as a weapon to pressure or punish states that defy their geopolitical interests. Sanctions can cripple a target country's economy by cutting off access to international markets and banking and technology. The US has an outside ability to enforce sanctions due to the hegemonic rule of the dollar in global trade and finance. With the dollar as the world reserve currency, and the backbone of international transactions, the US can unilaterally freeze countries out of the global financial system. For example, the US has imposed sweeping sanctions on countries like Cuba, Iran, and Venezuela for decades, causing severe economic hardships to those nations and limiting their development. By leveraging its control over dollar-based networks such as the SWIFT banking system, the US can isolate and deplete the resources of governments it considers hostile without firing a shot. In 2012, the US pressured the SWIFT network to disconnect Iranian banks as part of sanctions over Iran's nuclear program, effectively blocking Iran from receiving payments for oil exports and dealing a devastating blow to its economy. Such cases demonstrate how financial imperialism allows policy enforcement. As one analyst puts it, modern imperialists dominate by manipulating and controlling international financial markets, ensuring that recalcitrant state are kept in check via economic might rather than direct occupation. Sanctions in some serve as a form of hybrid warfare that can achieve regime change or policy change by inflicting economic suffering, all under the guise of promoting democracy or security. But what is neoliberal policy influence? Beyond formal programs, Western powers diffuse their economic ideology through soft power and expert networks. Technical assistance and development aid often come with strings attached. Western advisors encourage or insist on policy choices like lowering trade barriers, protecting foreign investor rights, or cutting subsidies that benefit local industries. Through USAID projects, non-government organization programs, and academic training, a generation of economists and officials in the global south were taught to adopt free market reforms congenial to Western interests. Trade agreement pushed by the US and European Union similarly lock in neoliberal rules. For example, stroke intellectual property rights, tariff elimination that favor Western corporations. The cumulative effect of these mechanisms is that many post-colonial states have had limited freedom to chart autonomous economic paths. Instead, they operate in an international economic system where wealth flows from a periphery to the center. Often through debt payments, profit repatriation by multinationals, or unequal terms of trade, replicating the old extraction and colonial days in new forms. In this way, Western imperialism dominance ensures and endures not by direct rule, but by entrenching economic structures that keep the global south dependent and subordinate. But what is the impact of de-dollarization and alternative financial infrastructures? As a reaction to Western control financial order, emerging powers and developing countries have begun creating alternative institutions and reducing reliance on the US dollar. This movement towards de-dollarization and new financial infrastructures is reshaping global geopolitics, challenging the post-World War II Bretton Woods systems dominated by the West. The rise of BRICS and China-led institutions with a group of major non-Western economies known as BRICS, which is abbreviation of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa has spearheaded efforts to build parallel financial structures. They share a view that the current global system, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, SWIFT network, and etc., overrepresents the US and European Union and its allies. BRICS nations have thus established their own development bank and reserve fund. The new development bank, founded in 2014, is a multilateral lender intended to mimic the World Bank, but with developing country leadership and without the stringent political conditions Western leaders impose. Likewise, the BRICS Contingency Reserve Agreement is a currency reserve pool set up as an analog to the International Monetary Fund, meant to provide emergency liquidity to members and reduce their need to depend on IMF bailouts. These steps are explicitly aimed at creating an alternative financial system that empowers the global South. China has been at the forefront of many initiatives. It launched the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank in 2015 as a new development bank, attracting even US allies in Europe as its members, and has promoted the use of its currency, renminbi, in trade deals. The BRICS bloc and other emerging economies have also increased cooperation in trading among themselves, sometimes called South-South trade, to replace dependence on Western market. Cumulatively, these efforts reflect a multipolar vision for global finance, where no single power like the US can dictate terms. So we are seeing a decline of dollar hegemony. A cornerstone of US global power has been the dollar dominance. However, recent trends indicate a gradual erosion of the dollar-centric order. The BRICS, for instance, have openly advocated de-dollarization, encouraging trades in local currencies, and even discussing a common BRICS currency to settle international transactions. This is driven in part by geopolitical rifts. Russia, China, and others seek to avoid the risk of US sanctions that come with dollar transactions. In fact, BRICS leaders in 2023 formally agreed to increase use of national currencies in trade. At the same time, global central banks have been slowly diversifying reserves. The dollar's share of worldwide foreign exchanges reserves has fallen from about 70% in 2000 to roughly 60% by 2022. As countries allocate more holdings to euros, gold, and even Chinese renminbi. Well, the dollar still dominates. Around 88% of international Forex transactions involved USD. This downward trend signals a weakening of the post-dollar war, post-war dollar hegemony. The geopolitical consequences are significant. US influence is partly predicated on controlling the main currency of trade. If more countries conduct all sales or infrastructure loans in Chinese yuan, renminbi, or euros or other currency, the US loses leverage. For example, the ability to sanction banks via dollar system. Already Russia and China conduct the majority of their bilateral trade in rubles and yuan, bypassing the dollar. Multiple countries from India to Brazil have struck agreement to settle trade in local currency or via bartering to the risk from dollar exposure. What is the role of new financial networks and regional agreements? In parallel, alternative payment and settlement networks are being developed. After US sanctions on Iran and Russia demonstrated the West's sway over SWIFT and major banks, targeted countries responded by creating substitutes. China SIPS, cross-border interbank payment system, and Russia SPFS are examples of payment messaging networks that allow banks to transfer funds without using SWIFT or Western banks as intermediaries. While still limited in reach, they form the plumbing of a future financial system outside Western control. Additionally, regional initiatives are linking economies in ways that circumvent Western dominance. In Eurasia, projects like the Belt and Road Initiative come with Chinese-financed development bank and swap lines that reduce reliance on Western credit. In Asia-Pacific and regional comprehensive economic partnership, trade pact led by ASEAN with China minus the US creates a huge trade zone which members may increasingly use national currencies. Even in Europe, US abuse of dollar sanctions has pushed the EU to consider mechanisms like the short-lived INSTEX for Iran to trade in euros to avoid US oversight. The motivation for all this is clear. Countries seek insurance against Western financial coercion. A vivid example was international expansion from the SWIFT network in 2012, which cut off its banks from the world. A severe national blow that crippled Iran's ability to sell oil. Such incidents have accelerated the pursuit of financial sovereignty elsewhere. The emergence of new development banks, currency swap agreements among developing nations, and digital payment systems all point to a more pluralistic global finance. While the dollar and the Bretton Woods institutions still reign for now, the International Monetary Fund and World Bank are far bigger than like NDB. The foundation of Western financial imperialism are beginning to crack and erode. De-dollarization, even if incremental, reduced the unparalleled privilege the US has employed and foreshadows a geopolitical shift towards a multipolar order where Western powers must compete and not dictate in the economic arena. And with this said, I'm ending part one of this presentation, and next week we will be talking about part two of this like anti-colonial movement, neo-colonialism, and alternatives to it. But I like to come to the beginning of this presentation when I told you that my name is Paul Arsov. I'm the founder of the Decentralized Web project and several other projects. The Decentralized Web project is providing decentralization communication and advertising platform, and it is monetized through advertising. The website and the URL of this project is decentralizedweb.org. Decentralized and web, these are two words, they're put all together, and then there is dot and it ends with org. Once again, decentralizedweb.org. In this project, we have our own blockchain instance, and this blockchain instance is providing tokens, which are rewards for users joining our platform, and these are rewards for users who are viewing advertising on our platform and inviting new users to our platform. The means of decentralization is different than the decentralization claimed by blockchain networks, and blockchain technology has fundamental and multiple flaws which prevents them from providing solution of decentralization. Our solution of decentralization is direct communication from user to user without going through a third party, namely a server or like a collection point, which is then going to pass information between the points it serves. And with this said, I'm ending talking about this first project. I like to mention the second project, which is a marketplace and a collection of non-fungible tokens. What is unique, special, and specific to our non-fungible tokens is that they're based on three-dimensional objects. With three-dimensional objects, there has to be a special software which loads it reads the 3D object file, then it loads, opens a window in a computer screen, then it displays the 3D object, and then it starts manipulating this object in a specific way. From the very beginning, we decided to build our own 3D software engine, and what it does, it reads the file of 3D object, it opens a window, it displays the 3D object, and then it starts animating the 3D object in a way of moving in a random fashion around the window it did open. But in addition to these basic capabilities, our 3D software engine has multiple additional capabilities. The first additional capability of our 3D NFTs is the capability of speaking. Our 3D NFTs can speak either in a male voice or in a female voice or in a whisper kind of a voice. In addition to the three basic capabilities, there are three different flavors. Like a voice can be spoken either in a normal speed fashion or in a slow speed fashion or in a fast speed fashion. The second additional and important capability of our 3D NFTs is the capability of voice recognition. You can ask the 3D NFT, what is your name? And the 3D NFT is going to reply in voice with their name. You can ask the 3D NFT, who are you? And the 3D NFT is going to reply in few sentences of who they are. You can ask the 3D NFT to describe something, and then the 3D NFT is going to describe in few sentences what you did ask. The next additional and important capability of the 3D NFTs is the capability of them having a basic artificial intelligence. You can speak with the 3D NFT, and the 3D NFT is going to reply in a human way of what you asked or what you did request. The next and last additional important capability of our 3D NFTs is the capability of them being displayed in a way of stereoscopics. What stereoscopics means is that a part of the 3D NFT is going to be displayed in red or reddish colors, and another part of the 3D NFT is going to be displayed in blue or cyan colors. Like you can go to the website of the 3D NFT marketplace, and probably now is the time to tell you the name and the URL of the 3D NFT marketplace. It is 3dnft.decentralizedweb.org. 3D NFT is typed in a way of the number 3 followed by the letter D followed by 3 other letters NFT, and it is typed all together 3D NFT. Then there is dot, then there are two words, decentralized and web. They're typed all together, decentralized web. Then there is dot and it ends with org. Once again, 3dnft.decentralizedweb.org. On the top of the main page and all of the other pages, you're going to see a link to accessories. And when you click on this link, you're going to see that we are offering special glasses. When you click and order one pair of these glasses, when you receive these glasses, you're going to see that one lens of these glasses is red and the other lens of these glasses is blue cyan. Then you can put these glasses on. You can request displaying of the 3D NFT in the way of stereoscopics. And then you are going to see the 3D NFT coming out of the flat two-dimensional computer screen, and you are going to see it in real 3 dimensions. With this said, I'm ending talking about our 3D NFT software engine and the 3D NFT collection. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about our 3D NFT marketplace. Our 3D NFT marketplace has its own blockchain instance, And by having our own blockchain instance, we do not charge our users for deployments of the smart contracts for the non-fungible tokens, and we do not charge our users fees for transactions of transfer between one user and another user. By having our own blockchain instance, then we are detaching payments like for buying and receiving proceedings from sale from a single crypto coin, and we allow our users to pay in multiple crypto coins. Currently, the choice of crypto coins for buying and getting proceedings from sale include 4 coins, namely Solana Sol, Polygon Matic, Avalanche Avax, and Qcoin, which is a big centralized crypto exchange. They have a coin called KCS. But in addition to buying and selling with crypto, we have a second parallel and independent way of buying and receiving proceedings from sale done entirely in fiat currency. For example, if you're a user and you come to our 3D NFT marketplace, you click on the main page, you see our very first collection with all of the 3D NFTs listed one after another. You click on one of these 3D NFTs, and then you're going to see a drop-down menu which is asking to choose between 4 different crypto coins and the 5th choice of buying and selling with fiat currency. When you click on this 5th choice, then you're going to be requested to put the number of your debit or credit card, expiration date, and CVC. And when you complete this transaction, what is going to happen is there is going to be a conversion from your national fiat currency to US dollars, and the payment is going to be deposited in our bank account. Then we are going to do a transaction and transfer from initial ownership of the 3D NFT marketplace to you, and now you become owner of this 3D NFT. So let's say you play with this 3D NFT, and at some point you decide to put this 3D NFT for sale. So let's say there is a second user, they come to our 3D NFT marketplace, they browse through the 3D NFTs, and they see in particular the 3D NFT that you put for sale. They will be going through the same movement through like choosing between 4 different crypto coins and fifth choice of paying with fiat currency. So let's say they choose payment with fiat currency. They would be going through the same actions of putting their number of their debit or credit card, expiration date, and CVC. And when the transaction is completed, there's going to be a transfer from their national fiat currency, which could be different than your national fiat currency, and this transaction is going to convert to US dollars, and we are going to have a deposit in our bank account. Then we are going to follow with transfer of ownership from you to the second user, and now the second user becomes owner of this 3D NFT. Then we're going to do a transaction and transfer and conversion from US dollars to your national fiat currency, and this transfer is going to be deposited in your bank account in your national fiat currency. With this said, I'm ending talking about our second project. I'd like to mention a third project that we're working on. In this project, we're building charging products for electric vehicles, and we anticipate that the number of electric vehicles is going to exponentially grow up, and this number of electric vehicles is going to be having difficulties in charging with energy because of this exponentially growing number of them being on the market. Currently, the charging of electric vehicles is handled mainly in a way of electric vehicles coming to charging stations which are modeled after gas stations for internal combustion engines. In these charging stations modeled after gas stations, there are a number of columns where the owner of electric vehicle is coming close to a specific charging station column. Then they are connecting electric cable to their electric vehicle. They identify themselves to the charging station. They start loading electric energy. The owner of electric vehicle is waiting for a while till their electric vehicle is charging, keeps charging. Then they leave, and they pay for the electric vehicle charged, and they leave. But the number of these charging stations is going to become ultimately insufficient. So we are proposing a new model. We call it the parking lot model. We did write an article on this model, and you can see this article on the website of this project. And the URL and the name of the website is power.arstec.com. Power is the ordinary word for power. Then there's dot. Then there's a word which I can abbreviate it letter by letter. It is Alpha, Romeo, Sierra, Tom, Echo, Charlie, Hotel. Altogether, Arstec, then there is dot, and it ends with com. Once again, power.arstec.com. On the main page, you are going to see several surveys that we are asking you to complete, which helps us in developing products. And there is also the link to the article of parking lot model versus gas station model. But in short, we are building charging products which could be outfitted at the parking lots of residential buildings, and many of the owners of electric vehicles, they live in residential buildings, and when they come after work, they could connect electric cable of our charging stations to the electric vehicle, and they can leave their vehicle to charge during the evening, the night, and early morning while they're at home in their residential building that they're living, residential high-rise apartment building. But many of these owners of electric vehicles, they're living, they're working in high-rise office buildings, and these high-rise office buildings also have ground floor parking lot and multiple underground floor parking lots. In the same way, the owners of electric vehicles, when they come to work, they could connect charging cable to their electric vehicle and leave their vehicle to park during the night, during the morning, afternoon, and early evening while they're at work. And with this said, I'm ending talking about this third project, and I like to mention fourth project that we're working on. In this fourth project, we built artificial intelligence agents, and this project is about entertainment and just for fun category. It fits into these categories, and what is interesting, different, and unique about this is that while many projects are between the user and the artificial intelligence entity, in our project there are two AI entities. They're like the user, the user initially requests the interaction between these two entities, and then the user is just observing and being entertained between the interaction of these entities. What these interactions between AI entities could be. For example, we could specify that one of this AI entity be very seductive. We can specify the second AI entity being very angry, and then like observe this interaction. We can specify that one AI entity tries to sell something to the second AI entity. For example, the first AI entity trying to sell a washing machine or trying to sell a car to the second AI entity, and etc. and etc. This project has multiple additional directions where it can go. It can add multiple voices to the AI entities. It can add additional entities. For example, instead of two AI entities, three AI entities interacting with each other, and we could offer many additional like AI technologies. We can combine them into AI agent, which provides like not only interactions viewed in a browser, but interactions which could be placed in a video, which could then be creatively like requested by the user themselves. And with this said, I like to tell you the name and the URL of this, the website of this project. It is ai2ai.decentralizedweb.org. AI2AI is typed with the letter A, followed by the letter I, followed by the number 2, and followed by two other letters, A and I. Altogether, AI2AI, then there is dot, then there are two words, decentralized and web, and they're typed all together. Decentralized web, then there is dot, and it ends with org. Once again, ai2ai.decentralizedweb.org. We did recently launch our project on multiple sites which provide listing of project and their launch sites. Please check this project and enjoy the interaction between two AI entities. We provide initial credit, and then you can top up and add credit by your debit or credit card. And with this said, I'm ending this educational presentation. Thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. Have a nice day. Have a nice evening, and goodbye.